No one is coming to save you, not because you are unworthy, but because life does not operate that way. Every day you wait for a signal, for motivation, for someone to understand you better. You are handing the steering wheel of your life to something else. And when you lose that steering wheel for long enough, you begin living a life that no longer feels like it belongs to you. This video is not for those seeking temporary emotion. It is for those who are tired of drifting in silence. For those who want to understand why discipline is not force but the path to reclaiming control, and why real strength is built on days when no one is watching. If you are here, it is very likely time to stop waiting and begin becoming someone who is no longer pulled away. No one is coming to save you. This truth is not harsh, it is liberating. Because the moment you stop waiting for a hand to pull you out of your current reality, you begin to stand upright on your own 2 feet. Most adults remain stuck not because they lack ability, but because they are still unconsciously waiting for permission, waiting for the perfect time, waiting for motivation to appear, waiting for someone to understand them better. But life does not operate that way. Life only begins to change direction at the moment you accept that no one is coming to fix what you have left unattended for far too long. There is an invisible line that every person must cross on their own. The line between living as someone led by circumstances and living as someone who actively leads themselves. This line is not marked by a major event. It usually arrives quietly. One morning you wake up with a familiar sense of exhaustion. One day passes that looks exactly like the one before it. One evening ends with an emptiness you cannot quite name. And in those ordinary moments, a silent question appears. Will I keep drifting, or will I take the wheel? The moment you realize no one is coming to save you is also the moment you reclaim the power you mistakenly handed over to circumstances. You stop blaming the past. You stop negotiating with procrastination. You no longer need anyone to confirm that you are worthy of change. You understand that every delay has a cost. And the greatest cost is not failure, but the loss of respect for yourself. Life does not collapse in a single day. It is eroded through small choices that are never made. Through moments when you know what you should do but choose what is easier. Through small promises that are broken and then justified. Each time, self-control steps back one pace. No one sees it, but your inner world remembers clearly. And eventually, you feel as though you are living a life that does not belong to you, even though everything on the outside still looks fine. This is where the journey begins. Not with an emotional explosion, but with a clear and sober decision. The decision to stop waiting. The decision to return to full responsibility. The decision to gather back the energy that has been scattered for too long. No one asks you to change your entire life in a single day, but life does ask you to be honest with yourself right now. From this moment forward, there is no more victim story. There is only one clear choice. Either you continue to let the world pull you along, or you begin building yourself in silence until nothing can pull you away from the path you have chosen. Life does not change direction because you learn something new. It changes when your attention is placed in the right place. Most adults do not lack knowledge. They lack consistent focus on themselves. Their energy is divided in too many directions. Other people's opinions, social expectations, news, comparison, worry about things beyond their control. Each time this happens, you step one pace further away from the center of your own life. And when you are no longer standing at the center, you begin living by reaction instead of choice. The core truth is simple, yet few people dare to face it. No one can build your life for you, and nothing changes until you return to seriously investing in yourself. Focusing on yourself is not selfish, it is responsibility, because when you do not master yourself, you become a burden of circumstance. When you do not lead your life, you will be led by whatever is loudest around you. The modern world is designed to take your attention. It does not need your permission. It only needs your inattention. And when your attention is taken for long enough, you lose direction. Not because you are weak, but because you are no longer in the cockpit. Focusing on yourself is the act of reclaiming that cockpit. It is the decision to stop living in fragmentation. It is the decision to ask one question every day. Does this bring me closer to the person I want to become, or not? When you begin living with that question, life changes in a very quiet way. You do not need to do more. You need to do less, but do it more precisely. Fewer concerns, fewer distractions, fewer compromises with things that weaken you. In return, you gain clarity, and clarity is the most valuable asset of a mature adult. When you are clear about where you are going, you are no longer pulled by side roads. When you are clear about what matters, you no longer argue with yourself every day. You begin choosing deliberately, choosing your sleep time, choosing how you start your morning, choosing what you allow into your mind, choosing what you do even when no one is watching. Focusing on yourself is not a declaration. It is a sequence of small, repeated actions. You spend time building foundations: health, physical strength, mental strength, personal discipline. You learn to stay with discomfort instead of escaping it. You learn to complete what needs to be done before seeking what feels easy. You learn to keep your word to yourself, even when there is no immediate reward. And each time you do this, you lay one brick for the future. What matters is that you do not wait for emotion to accompany you. Emotion follows action. When you are focused, emotions gradually stabilize. When you are scattered, emotions become chaotic. This is not vague philosophy. This is how mature human beings operate. You cannot build a strong life with a mind that is constantly being pulled away. You cannot expect significant results when each day you allow your attention to be eroded by trivial things. Every moment you return to yourself, you are investing. Every moment you protect your focus, you are accumulating strength. And this strength does not explode. It thickens, quietly, patiently, persistently, until one day you realize you are no longer as easily shaken as before. You no longer need validation. You no longer chase noise. You do your work. You live by your own rhythm. You understand that life only changes direction when you have the courage to place yourself at the center and keep yourself there long enough. This is not a one-day journey. This is a long-term commitment, and everything of value demands that kind of commitment. This world does not reward good intentions. It rewards those who can master themselves for a long enough period of time. This is an unspoken rule, but it is absolutely fair. You do not need a high starting point. You do not need extraordinary luck. You only need the ability to regulate your own behavior when no one is watching. When others wait for emotion to lead, you act. When others wait for favorable conditions, you train in imperfect ones. When others talk about dreams, you build structures to turn them into reality. The world looks at results, but results are always the consequence of something deeper. That depth is your level of self-mastery in moments when no one sees. Strong adults are not those who never feel tired. They are those who do not allow fatigue to make decisions for them. Powerful people are not those who never feel fear. They are those who do not allow fear to take the wheel. And those who ultimately win are not the ones who do the most in a single day. They are the ones who do the right thing every day, even when nothing is stimulating them to do so. This rule frustrates many people because it does not allow blame. You cannot blame your family. You cannot blame the era you live in. You cannot blame others for not understanding you. Every time you break a promise to yourself, you pay an invisible fee. That fee does not arrive immediately, but it accumulates. At some point, you feel weaker without knowing why. That is when you have lost self-control long enough to no longer trust yourself. The world did not do this to you. You unknowingly allowed it to happen. The rules of the world are very clear. Whoever controls their attention, habits, and reflexes controls the trajectory of their life. Whoever allows their attention to be pulled away every day lives in a reactive state. They are busy but do not move forward. They try but do not last. They understand a lot but do not change. and they often fail to see that the problem is not the goal, but the ability to manage themselves in each hour of living. Self-mastery is not rigid control. It is clarity, clear about what matters, clear about what must be done first, clear about what must be removed. When you are clear, you do not need to argue with yourself. You do not need constant motivation. You do not need anyone to push you. You do what needs to be done because it aligns with the person you are building. Every day, the world will try to pull you off axis. A notification, a comparison, a criticism, a feeling of boredom, a day that does not go as planned. If you have not mastered yourself, you will drift with these forces without realizing it. You will react, you will delay, you will seek comfort to escape, and another day will pass without you moving closer to what you claim is important. But when you understand the rules, you stop being surprised. You anticipate these forces. You do not resent them. You prepare. You build a life structure strong enough that even when emotions are low, action still happens. You do not ask whether you feel inspired today. You ask who you are today and what that person needs to do. The world does not care how you feel. It responds to what you repeat. If you repeat discipline, the world gradually opens opportunities. If you repeat delay, the world gradually narrows your options. This is not belief, this is consequence. Those who master themselves will sooner or later create a clear gap from the crowd, not because they are more talented, but because they are more stable. They do not explode and disappear. They do not promise much and quit halfway. They show up consistently, and consistency is something the world cannot ignore. When you understand this rule, you stop looking for shortcuts. You stop envying the success of others. You look at your daily schedule. You look at how you start your mornings. You look at how you react when tired. You look at the small choices you once considered insignificant, because you know those very things are writing your future. Mastering yourself does not make you rigid. It makes you free, free from being led by emotion, free from dependence on validation, free from having to start over too many times. When you master yourself, you do not need to defeat anyone else. You only need to not betray your own standards. And over time, those standards lift you into a position that very few people ever reach. These are the rules. No secrets, no favoritism, no exceptions. And once you have seen them, you cannot pretend you never knew. Every serious journey begins with an unspoken oath, not a promise to the world, but a silent commitment to yourself. This oath is not loud. It does not need witnesses. It only needs to be kept. When you understand the rules, you understand that no miracle can replace long-term loyalty to a chosen direction. And it is here that you make an identity-level decision. From today, your focus will no longer be scattered. From today, you choose to build yourself until the results can no longer be denied. The inner oath is not about setting big goals and hoping emotion will carry you forward. It is about clearly defining how you will show up every day, regardless of circumstances. You do not swear that things will be easy. You swear that you will not quit when they are hard. You do not swear that you will always feel confident. You swear that you will act even when doubt appears. This is the difference between the dreamer and the builder. The dreamer needs conditions. The builder creates conditions. The dreamer talks about the future. The builder works with the present. This oath establishes a new boundary. There are things you no longer allow into your life. Conversations that weaken you, habits that drain your energy, short-term choices that destroy long-term vision. You do not need to hate them. You simply stop negotiating. When you negotiate with things that pull you off course, you are negotiating with your own future. And the future always pays a high price for small compromises. Focusing on building yourself until victory means accepting the invisible phase. There are days when no one sees your effort. There are weeks with no clear signal that you are on the right path. There are months of working in silence while others are louder. The inner oath keeps you steady in those empty spaces. It reminds you that value is not measured by temporary attention. but by the foundation being laid each day. Once you have taken the oath, you begin designing your life around it. You do not ask whether you feel like doing the work today. You ask what must be completed today to honor the commitment. You build your schedule not to stay busy, but to stay focused. You arrange your environment to support the right behavior instead of tempting the easy one. You understand that willpower is limited, so you use structure to protect it. The inner oath also forces you to face an uncomfortable truth. There will be times you fail. There will be days you lose rhythm. There will be moments you do not meet the standards you set. But the oath does not demand perfection. It demands return. The moment you realize you have drifted, you come back. No self-punishment, no justification, just return and continue. This ability to return is the real strength, not the one who never falls, but the one who does not stay on the ground. When you keep the oath long enough, a subtle change occurs. You begin to trust yourself, not blind trust, but trust built on evidence. Evidence that you do what you say. Evidence that you show up even without motivation. Evidence that you do not abandon yourself when things are hard. This confidence is not loud. It is solid. And this solidity changes how you step into every other area of life. Focusing on building yourself until victory does not mean obsessing over results. It means obsessing over process. You measure your days by whether you did what needed to be done. You do not let temporary emotion decide direction. You do not let slow progress make you doubt the entire path. You understand that every meaningful structure takes time to take shape, and during that time, the one who keeps the oath is the only one who knows what is being built. There will be moments when you are tempted to take another path, a faster path, an easier path, a path that earns more praise. But the inner oath reminds you that every shortcut comes with an invoice, and that invoice is usually delivered in the future, when you no longer have the energy to pay it. You choose the slower but truer path, the path that requires you to mature before you succeed, the path that forces you to build inner strength before results appear. When you focus on building yourself, you stop comparing. You understand that everyone has their own rhythm. You do not need to run at someone else's pace. You only need to keep your own rhythm unbroken. Each day, you place another brick, small, consistent, precise. No one applauds this work, and that is exactly why it matters. Because very few people are willing to work when there is no audience. The inner oath ends a phase of reactive living and opens a phase of intentional living. You are no longer pulled by temporary emotion. You no longer need the world to agree for you to continue. You know what you are building. You know why it matters. And you know that victory is not a dramatic moment, but the inevitable result of keeping your word to yourself long enough. Once this oath is carved deep, the journey does not return to the old starting point. From here on, every next part is simply the verification of the commitment you chose to keep. When people fail, they often think it is because they lack ability or opportunity. But the real enemy rarely reveals itself clearly. It does not appear as a major event. It appears every day in the form of small interruptions, seemingly harmless choices, quiet slips in rhythm that no one notices. Distraction is the most dangerous invisible enemy because it does not make you stop, it makes you drift. And if you drift long enough, no matter how hard you try, you will never arrive where you want to be. Distraction does not come from a single source. It comes from many directions at once. A little excess information, a little comparison, a little worry about what others are thinking, a little desire for immediate comfort. Each of these on its own is not strong enough to destroy you, but repeated every day, they form a constant pull, dragging your attention away from what truly matters. And when attention is pulled away, energy follows. When energy follows, results disappear. Mature adults often do not realize they are being distracted. They stay busy. They keep working. They still feel tired. But that exhaustion does not come from building. It comes from being pulled back and forth between too many weightless things. You end the day feeling like you did a lot, yet made no real progress. When this feeling repeats long enough, doubt appears, and doubt gives birth to discouragement, not because you are not capable, but because distraction has drained your forward momentum. This invisible enemy is especially dangerous because it often disguises itself as something reasonable. You tell yourself you need to stay informed. You tell yourself you need a short break. You tell yourself you are watching others to learn. But beneath the surface, many of these actions do not serve your long-term direction. They only serve temporary relief. And every time you choose temporary relief over long-term direction, you sign an unfavorable agreement with your future. Distraction also erodes identity. When you do not stay focused on one direction long enough, you begin to doubt yourself. You no longer know what you truly want. You are unsure whether you are on the right path. You change direction constantly. You start many things but finish very little. Each unfinished attempt erodes self-respect a little. No one says it out loud, but inside, you feel unreliable to yourself. And nothing weakens a person faster than that feeling. The world does not accidentally create distraction. It is designed that way. Your attention has value. Many systems are built to take it. They do not need you to fail. They only need you to lose focus. They only need you to fragment. Because a fragmented person cannot build anything with depth. They consume a lot, but create very little. And when you consume too many things unrelated to your path, you begin living someone else's life instead of your own. To understand this enemy clearly, you must look honestly at how your day unfolds. Not your big plans, but your small moments. What you do when discomfort appears, where you go when boredom arises, when something becomes difficult, whether you stay or look for something else to escape. These answers reveal how much distraction is controlling you. And they clearly reveal how your future is being written. Distraction does not only take time, it takes depth. When you work in a state of constant interruption, you never reach the deeper layers of your ability. You stay on the surface. You know many things but master none. You begin many tasks but never go to the end. And the world does not reward surface-level effort. The world rewards depth. Depth only comes when you stay long enough with one task, one direction, one commitment. This invisible enemy also causes you to misdiagnose the problem. When you make no progress, you think you need to change your goal. But often, what needs to change is not the goal, but the level of focus. When you feel unmotivated, you think you need more inspiration. But most of the time, what you need is fewer distractions. Motivation does not appear in a chaotic environment. It appears when energy is concentrated. To confront distraction, you need a serious attitude. Not tension, but respect for your time and attention. You begin asking a question before each choice. Does this serve the person I am building or not? If it does not, you are willing to let it go. Not because it is bad, but because it does not fit. Maturity is not about having many options. It is about knowing when to refuse. As you gradually remove distraction, you feel a clear shift. The mind becomes quieter. Action becomes less hesitant. Days carry more weight. You begin completing things that once dragged on. You start seeing the link between today's effort and tomorrow's result. Trust in yourself is restored, not through affirmation, but through real experience that you can focus and follow through. The strongest invisible enemy exists only when you do not name it. Once you clearly see distraction and its damage, you are no longer naive about small interruptions. You know that every time you allow yourself to be pulled off axis, you are trading your future for short-term comfort. And when you truly understand that, you do not need reminders. You protect your attention as the most valuable thing you own, because you know with certainty that your future is being built or broken in those very moments that once seemed unimportant. Once distraction has entered your life, it does not only come from what you see, it comes from what you hear and from what you say to yourself. External noise and internal noise work together to steal control in a very subtle way. You can turn off a device, but it is far more difficult to silence the conversations happening inside your head. And it is those conversations that decide whether you move forward or pull back. External noise appears as unsolicited advice. Other people's expectations, constantly shifting social standards, success stories told without context. Each piece of information carries an implicit message. You should be faster. You should be better. You should be different. If you are not alert enough, you begin adjusting yourself to answer these calls. And when you adjust too much, you lose your own axis. You are no longer sure whether you are following your own direction or simply trying not to fall behind others. Internal noise is even more dangerous because it speaks in a familiar voice. It uses your language. It draws from your memories. It repeats moments when you failed. It questions your ability at the exact moment you need decisiveness the most. You hear thoughts like, maybe I am not good enough. Maybe I started too late. Maybe others are more suited for this. These thoughts are not always loud. Sometimes they are very soft. And that softness is what makes you not resist them. You treat them as truth instead of recognizing them as a temporary state. When external noise activates internal noise, control is stolen without you realizing it. You begin reacting instead of choosing. You change plans out of fear of being judged. You delay because you are afraid of not doing well enough. You seek distraction to escape the discomfort created by doubt. And each time you do this, you hand the wheel to things that do not serve your long-term interest. What makes this dangerous is how reasonable the process feels. You think you are being cautious. You think you are listening. You think you are considering carefully. But beneath the surface, you are moving away from independent decision-making. You allow too many external factors to enter choices that only require inner clarity. When too many voices speak at once, your own voice becomes smaller. And when your voice loses weight in your own life, you begin to live off course. Strong adults are not those who hear nothing. They are those who know how to select. They understand that not every piece of information needs to be absorbed. Not every opinion needs to be considered. Not every emotion needs to be acted upon. Mastery does not mean controlling the world. It means controlling the door that decides what enters the mind. To reclaim control, you must learn to recognize noise. When a thought appears, you do not rush to believe it. You observe it. Does it move you closer to the action that needs to be taken or not? If it does not, you do not argue with it. You do not suppress it. You simply do not let it lead. You return to the task at hand. Action is the strongest filter for internal noise. When you act in the right direction, many thoughts automatically lose their influence. With external noise, you must design silence. Not by escaping the world, but by setting boundaries. You choose information sources carefully. You limit exposure time. You do not begin your day by allowing hundreds of opinions to flood your mind. You begin your day by identifying the most important thing that needs to be completed. When priorities are set first, noise has less space to enter. Another critical point is learning to distinguish between feedback and noise. Feedback helps you adjust action. Noise makes you doubt yourself without offering clear direction. Feedback comes from those who understand your context and goals. Noise comes from the crowd that bears no responsibility for your outcome. When you fail to distinguish between the two, you allow noise to disguise itself as feedback and pull you off course. Noise also distorts your sense of progress. You see the results of others without seeing their process. You compare your early stage to their middle stage. This comparison creates false pressure. That pressure pushes you to speed up by sacrificing foundation. But every acceleration without foundation leads to collapse. When you understand this, you stop rushing. You accept your rhythm. You know that the right speed is the one you can sustain without losing clarity. Control is not stolen in one dramatic moment. It is eroded through hundreds of small moments when you let noise decide for you. But the opposite is also true. Control is restored through small choices when you return to what matters. When you choose to turn off a source of interference, when you choose to complete a task even while the mind is noisy, when you choose to keep standards even when no one knows. Gradually, you notice a subtle shift. You are less reactive. You are less pulled into unnecessary conflict. You no longer need to respond to everything. There is space between stimulus and response, and in that space, there is freedom. Freedom to choose actions aligned with the person you are building. As noise fades, you begin to hear another voice more clearly. It is the voice of clarity. It does not shout. It does not rush. It simply points to the next thing that needs to be done. And when you begin to trust and follow that voice, control returns. Quietly, without declaration. Just a steady sense that you are living from the inside out, rather than being pulled from the outside in. This is the foundation that allows the next parts to be built on a mind calm enough to endure a long journey. Everything you are building stands on a single foundation: attention. When your attention remains in your hands, you have the ability to create change. When your attention is pulled away, even the best plans become fragile. It is not talent that determines the trajectory of your life. It is where you place your attention each day. This is a truth rarely spoken, yet it governs everything. You become what you consistently direct your mind toward. Attention is a non-renewable resource. Time that passes can still be compensated with effort. Energy that runs low can be restored with rest. But attention that is spread too thin for too long causes you to lose direction. You do not know where you are going because you do not stay long enough with any direction to see the path take shape. And when the path does not take shape, you begin to doubt yourself. Protecting attention is not about living closed off. It is about living intentionally. You understand that every time you allow your attention to be pulled toward something that does not serve the person you are building, you are allowing your future to be negotiated. No one forces you, you allow it yourself. And this permission happens quietly. One unnecessary check, one small delay, one indulgence in the urge to escape difficult work. These moments accumulate into habits. Habits shape character. Character creates destiny. Those who master their attention do not try to do everything. They choose very few things and carry them through to completion. They understand that power does not come from constant variety, but from depth built in silence. When you stay long enough with one task, one skill, one direction, you reach a level most people never touch. Not because you are more talented, but because you did not leave too early. To protect attention, you must design your day as a system, not a rigid system, but one that protects what matters. You clearly identify the time when your energy and focus are strongest. You reserve that time for the hardest work, the work with the greatest long-term impact. You do not allow small tasks to intrude into those hours. You understand that if important work is not protected, it will always be consumed by trivial tasks. Protecting attention also requires accepting an uncomfortable truth. You cannot move fast if you are not willing to leave some things behind. There are interests that are not bad, but no longer fit. There are conversations that are not toxic, but throw off your rhythm. There are habits that do not destroy you immediately, but quietly weaken you. Maturity is not about constant addition. Maturity is knowing when to stop. When you begin protecting your attention, you will face a sense of absence. You are accustomed to constant stimulation. When stimulation decreases, you feel empty. Many people return to distraction simply to fill that space. But that space is not a problem. It is the space required for power to accumulate. In silence, you hear more clearly. In slowing down, you see more clearly. And in that clarity, action becomes sharper. Protected attention changes how you work. You no longer jump from task to task. You complete one cycle at a time. You close one door before opening the next. This creates a very real sense of progress. Not the feeling of being busy, but the feeling of building. When you feel that you are building, motivation is no longer an issue. Motivation arises naturally when you see your effort taking form. Protecting attention also changes how you relate to emotion. When the mind is not stretched by too many inputs, emotions come and go without taking control. You can feel bored and still work. You can feel tired and still maintain standards. You can feel doubt and not allow doubt to decide for you. This is the mark of mature strength. Emotions do not disappear, but they no longer hold the wheel. Another important truth is that your attention teaches others how to treat you. When you are scattered, you permit interruption. When you are clear, you establish boundaries. When you respect your time and focus, others learn to respect them as well. No long explanations are needed. Your behavior speaks for itself. Over time, protecting attention creates a deep shift in identity. You begin to see yourself as someone with weight, someone not easily pulled away, someone capable of staying with difficult work. This self-respect does not come from praise. It comes from knowing you can rely on yourself, and there is no stronger foundation than that. Personal power does not come from explosive moments. It comes from the ability to keep attention in the right place over a long period of time. When you protect this, everything else begins to align. Decisions become clearer. Actions become more consistent. The future is no longer a vague concept. It begins to take shape, built day by day, through the attention you chose not to give away. And from this foundation, the true path of disciplined growth can finally begin. Strength is not born from rare major decisions. It is formed from small actions repeated long enough to become identity. Many people wait for a life-changing moment, but that moment does not arrive like a thunderbolt. It arrives when you do the same right thing day after day, even when there are no signs that results are getting closer. This is where most people quit, because a system of small actions demands humility. It does not give you a heroic feeling. It only gives you the chance to become solid. An action system is not an endless to-do list. It is a very small set of core behaviors, carefully selected, that directly shape the person you are building. You do not try to do more, you try to do better. You identify the actions that, when done consistently, trigger other positive actions. When you focus on these levers, life begins to change in an orderly way. The most important quality of a system is repetition, not intensity. You do not need a perfect day. You need an honest day, honest with the standards you set, honest with the inner oath, honest about doing what needs to be done before doing what feels pleasant. Each day you keep this honesty, you send yourself a clear signal. I am someone I can trust. That signal accumulates into self-respect, and self-respect is the most sustainable fuel for a long journey. A system of small actions works best in silence. When you talk too much about what you are going to do, you spend the energy needed to do it. When you seek validation before results exist, you place yourself in dependence. Silence preserves energy. Silence keeps your focus on building instead of performing. And silence creates distance between you and the crowd, because very few people are willing to work without an audience. In this system, you do not measure your day by emotion, but by completion. You may feel good or bad, but the question remains the same. Was the core action completed today or not? When this question is answered consistently, emotions gradually stabilize around behavior, not the other way around. This is where many people misunderstand. They think they need the right emotion to act, but the right system creates the right emotion over time. An effective action system also respects human limits. It does not rely on pure willpower. It relies on environment. You arrange your space so that the right behavior is easier than the wrong one. You reduce friction for what needs to be done. You increase friction for what pulls you off course. When the environment supports you, you do not need to fight yourself every day. You simply follow the prepared path. This system also carries you through days without emotion. There are days when you feel no meaning, days when you doubt the path, days when everything feels heavy. The system does not ask you to believe. It only asks you to act. And when you act on days like that, you create a deep shift in identity. You are no longer someone who only moves when conditions are favorable. You become someone who can move forward under imperfect conditions. This is a major advantage that very few people develop. Every small repeated action is a vote for the person you want to become. You do not change yourself through affirmations. You change by voting every day through behavior. When these votes accumulate, a new identity forms. And when identity changes, the right behavior becomes more natural. You no longer need to force yourself as much. You act because that is who you are. A system of small actions also clarifies the relationship between effort and results. You begin to see that what happens today is the consequence of what you did before, not in a linear way, but in a cumulative way. There are phases where you do a great deal and results do not yet appear, but the system helps you trust that energy does not disappear. It is being stored, and when a threshold is reached, results appear faster than you expect. What matters is that you do not break the system because of one off day. A strong system is not one that never breaks. It is one that recovers quickly. When you slip, you return the very next day. No self-blame, no overcompensation, just return. This return is the true sign of strength. It shows that the system is larger than temporary emotion. Over time, a system of small actions creates a different rhythm of life. You are not rushed. You are not panicked. You know what needs to be done each day. This clarity frees a great deal of mental energy. You do not need to make constant decisions. You do not need to argue with yourself. You follow a rhythm that has been designed, and this rhythm carries you much farther than short bursts of speed ever could. When you look back, you do not see one single moment that changed everything. You see a chain of ordinary days lived with quiet discipline. That chain lifted you into a new position, not loud, not showy, but stable enough to not be pulled down by the next waves of uncertainty. And from this foundation of identity, the journey moves into a testing phase, where the system will be proven in days when no one is watching. There is a truth very few people accept. Most strength is built on days when no one is watching. No spotlight, no praise, no signal that you are on the right path. It is precisely on those days that discipline reveals its true value. Because if you only show up when you feel motivated or when someone is observing, you are not building strength. You are performing. And performance does not create a foundation. Showing up every day does not mean doing everything. It means doing the most important work even when the mind resists. It is the moment you sit down to work without enthusiasm. The moment you keep a habit when your schedule is disrupted. The moment you choose to honor a commitment instead of chasing temporary comfort. These choices are not impressive, but they accumulate, and that accumulation creates a gap that others cannot close with short bursts of effort. Discipline is often misunderstood as harsh self-forcing, but mature discipline is respect. Respect for time, respect for energy, respect for your own future. When you show up every day, you send a clear message inward. I matter enough not to be abandoned. Repeated long enough, this message repairs many invisible fractures you may not even realize you carry. Days when no one is watching are also the days you are most tempted to negotiate with yourself. You say today can be a break. You say one time does not matter. You say you will make up for it tomorrow. Each negotiation sounds reasonable, but the future is not built on reasonable excuses. It is built on consistent choices. When you allow standards to be broken too easily, they stop being standards. They become vague wishes. Showing up every day does not demand perfection. It demands honesty. Honesty with the oath you made. Honesty with the system you designed. Honesty with what you know needs to be done. There are days you do less than planned. Days when quality is lower than you hoped. But if you still show up, you keep the rhythm. And keeping rhythm matters far more than feeling good on any single day. On days when no one is watching, you learn to stay with discomfort. You learn that boredom does not destroy you. Fatigue does not get to decide for you. Doubt does not have veto power. When you continue to act while these feelings exist, you retrain the mind. You teach it that action does not need permission from emotion. This is a major step of maturity that many people never reach. Showing up every day also separates your value from immediate results. You stop measuring yourself by a good or bad day. You measure by continuity. When you look back at a week or a month, you see a chain of presence. That chain gives you stability. You know that even if today is imperfect, the trajectory is still correct. And the trajectory is what determines the destination. There is a particular loneliness that comes with quiet discipline. You work while others relax. You go to bed early while others stay up late. You refuse short-term pleasure to protect long-term importance. No one applauds these choices. Sometimes they are even misunderstood. But discipline does not require agreement. It only requires consistency. When you show up every day, you begin to notice a change in how you speak to yourself. Before, your inner voice was full of doubt. Now it becomes steadier, not because you convinced yourself, but because you have evidence. Evidence that you do not quit when no one is forcing you. Evidence that you can rely on yourself. And nothing builds inner strength more powerfully than that proof. Days when no one is watching are also where patience is trained. You work without knowing exactly when results will arrive. There is no clear timeline. There is only the system and your presence. This patience is not passive waiting. It is continuing to do the right work while accepting that progress has its own rhythm. When you learn this, comparison loses its grip. You stop rushing to destroy foundations just to match someone else's speed. Showing up every day also clarifies the line between those who talk and those who do. Many people speak about discipline. Very few live it when there is no audience. When you belong to the second group, you do not need to prove anything. Results will speak for you. But more importantly, you do not need those results to continue. You continue because this is who you are becoming. There will be phases when you question whether what you are doing has meaning. You see no clear difference. You feel no reward. This is where many people stop. But if you understand the nature of discipline, you know that reward does not always appear as immediate results. Sometimes the reward is that you did not quit. Sometimes it is that you are no longer as easily shaken. Sometimes it is the calm you bring into difficulty. When you show up every day long enough, something strange happens. You no longer need to push yourself as hard. Presence becomes default. You do not ask whether you should act. You simply act. And when action becomes default, a great amount of mental energy is released. You stop fighting yourself. You move with yourself. Showing up every day when no one is watching is a deep form of commitment. It is not glamorous. It is not celebrated. But it creates a rare kind of strength. The strength of someone who knows they will be there regardless of circumstance. And once you have that strength, the next stages of the journey are no longer about whether you are capable. They become about how you will use that capability when real challenges appear. Every serious building journey passes through a phase that very few people speak about clearly. The phase where you begin to live differently, but have not gone far enough to see results. Between those 2 points, loneliness appears. Not because you have no one around you, but because fewer people understand your new rhythm of life. You no longer join every form of entertainment. You no longer react to every call. You choose to stay with what matters, and that choice creates distance. This loneliness does not come because you are wrong. It comes because you are changing. When you raise your standards, not everyone comes along. Some people unconsciously feel uncomfortable when they see you becoming more serious. Some question your choices. Some remain silent. And that silence can feel heavier than criticism. But this is a necessary test. It tests why you are building yourself, for approval or for the truth you chose to live by. Doubt often appears alongside loneliness. When there is no clear external feedback, the mind begins to ask questions. Am I going in the right direction? Am I wasting time? Am I being too rigid? These questions are not signs of weakness. They are signs that you are stepping outside the familiar. The problem is not that doubt appears, but whether you allow doubt to take control or continue to act despite it. In this phase, many people return to their old path. Not because the old path is better, but because it is familiar. Familiarity gives a false sense of safety. There, you are understood, you are affirmed, you do not need to explain yourself. But the cost of returning is high. You lose momentum. You lose proof that you can stay with difficulty. And each time you return, the next departure becomes harder. Loneliness on the path of maturity is different from isolation. You do not shut yourself off from the world. You become more selective. You preserve a space to work with yourself. That space allows you to hear more clearly what you truly want to build. When there are fewer external voices, the voice of truth becomes clearer. It is not always comfortable, but it is clear. Doubt also has a constructive side if you do not let it rule. It forces you to review your system. It pushes you to check whether your actions are consistent. It helps you adjust without breaking commitment. Mature people are not afraid of questions. They simply do not allow questions to become excuses to stop. They ask in order to refine, not to retreat. In this phase, it is critical that you do not seek validation from those who are not walking your path. When you ask the wrong people, you receive answers that weaken you, not because they are bad, but because they see the world from a different position. Every piece of advice reflects the experience of the person giving it. If that experience does not align with your journey, the advice becomes noise. Loneliness also teaches you how to stand without a crowd. When you grow accustomed to continuing on your own, you develop a rare kind of strength, a strength that does not require constant encouragement, a strength that is not shaken by silence. You learn to rely on your system and your inner oath rather than on temporary emotion. And when you gain this, much of social pressure loses its power. There are days when doubt becomes very sharp. You work but feel no meaning. You look around and see others appearing more relaxed. You wonder whether you are making things unnecessarily hard for yourself. These days do not require answers. They only require that you do not stop. You continue to show up. You continue to keep rhythm. You allow doubt to exist without giving it the right to decide. Over time, you realize that loneliness is not an enemy. It is a signal that you are entering new territory. Anyone who builds something with depth must pass through this zone. The difference lies in whether they stay long enough. Those who stay long enough begin to see results. Not only external results, but internal change. You become steadier. You are less easily pulled away. You no longer need everyone to understand in order to continue. Doubt also changes shape. It is no longer the question of whether you should continue. It becomes the question of how you can do better. When doubt shifts from denial to refinement, you have crossed an important threshold. You are no longer fighting yourself. You are working with yourself. The phase of loneliness and doubt does not end with a dramatic victory. It ends quietly. You realize that you are no longer waiting for anyone to agree. You continue because this is who you chose to become. And when you can do that, the journey of maturity enters a new phase. A phase where the challenge is no longer whether you will continue, but how you will hold your standards when pressure increases. There are days when everything feels heavy, not because of a major event, but because of the accumulation of many small unresolved things. You wake up feeling slower. The mind is not as sharp as usual. The body resists. Work that once felt familiar suddenly becomes difficult. These days do not announce themselves. They appear in between ordinary days. And how you meet these difficult days determines the level of strength you truly possess. Those who have not yet matured often try to escape difficult days as quickly as possible. They seek distraction. They delay. They wait until they feel better before returning. But those who are building a foundation understand that difficult days are not accidents. They are part of the process. No long journey is made only of easy days. And no strength is built without passing through periods of load-bearing. The ability to stay is the core capacity on days like these. Staying with the work even without interest. Staying with the plan even when emotions fluctuate. Staying with standards even when lowering them would feel easier. Staying does not mean cruel forcing. It is the calm acceptance that today is not a day for breakthroughs, but a day for not abandoning your position. And not abandoning your position on a difficult day is a rare form of victory. Difficult days often activate old voices. Voices that say you have already tried enough, that you deserve rest. That skipping today will not matter. These voices sound reasonable, but if you observe closely, you will see they are not protecting you. They are protecting short-term comfort. And each time you give in, standards erode a little. No one notices, but you know, your inner world knows clearly. Strength is born when you learn to distinguish between two kinds of fatigue. Fatigue that requires rest, and fatigue that requires discipline. Rest at the right time restores you. Avoidance weakens you. Mature people learn to rest deliberately, not to rest in order to escape. They complete the core work first, then allow themselves to stop. This is how difficult days do not become empty days. Staying on difficult days also teaches you how to work with low energy. You learn to slow the pace without stopping. You break large tasks into smaller steps. You focus on completion rather than perfection. You maintain movement, and movement, even slow, is better than standing still. Over time, you develop the ability to maintain progress across different internal states. This is a major advantage, because life rarely offers ideal conditions. Difficult days are also where identity is tested. You can call yourself disciplined when everything is easy. But when pressure rises, when motivation drops, when no one is watching, your behavior tells the truth. Each time you stay, you carve a message deeper. I do not abandon when things are hard. This message accumulates into inner trust, and that trust changes how you step into future challenges. There is a paradox that difficult days often appear right before progress, not because they signal failure, but because they are the final load point before the structure rises. Many people quit here because they misread the signal. They think heaviness means they should stop, when in reality, it may be a sign that the system is being stretched to reach a new level. The ability to stay also frees you from identifying yourself with emotion. You no longer believe that feeling bad means doing something wrong. You understand that emotion is weather, action is direction. When you separate the two, you are no longer blown off course by every internal wind. You continue forward, sometimes slowly, sometimes heavily, but without losing direction. Difficult days also clarify what truly matters. When energy is low, you cannot do everything. You are forced to choose. And this selection reveals true priorities. You clearly see which tasks, if left undone, would pull you off course. You clearly see what can be skipped without long-term impact. This is how you refine the system. You remove excess. You preserve the core. The system becomes leaner and more resilient. There are difficult days that last longer than expected. Not one day, but a sequence. Such periods test patience at a deeper level. You no longer rely on hope that tomorrow will be different. You rely on structure. You keep your schedule. You keep core actions. You keep rhythm. And maintaining rhythm through extended difficulty creates a strength that no favorable condition can replace. Staying does not mean isolation. You still connect. But you do not seek rescue. You do not use sharing as a way to escape responsibility. You use it to clarify and return to the work that must be done. Mature people know that no one can stay in their place for them. The best support is not doing the work for you, but reminding you of who you chose to become. When you pass through enough difficult days, a subtle shift occurs. You fear them less. You know they do not define you. They are simply part of the journey. You no longer panic when motivation drops. You no longer doubt the entire path because of one heavy phase. This calm is the sign of real strength. Difficult days do not disappear when you mature, but how you meet them changes. You no longer ask how to avoid them. You ask how to pass through without losing standards. And each time you do that, you raise your load capacity a little higher. The higher this capacity becomes, the more you are able to build without collapse. In the end, the strength born from the ability to stay is quiet. There is no declarative moment, only a growing steadiness. You know that even if tomorrow is difficult, you will still be there. Not because success is guaranteed, but because you have become someone who does not abandon their position. And when you are that person, many future challenges are no longer about whether you can endure, but about how far you can go with the strength forged on days when no one wants to stay. No one goes far without stumbling. Falling is not abnormal on the path of maturity. What is abnormal is staying on the ground for too long. Most people are not defeated by the fall itself, they are defeated by how they interpret the fall. When a slip happens, they give it too much meaning. They say they are not suited for this, that the system does not work, that previous effort was meaningless. And it is this interpretation that breaks the trajectory. Standing up is not a dramatic act. It is a very ordinary but decisive decision. The decision not to let one moment rewrite the entire story. The decision not to use a mistake as evidence against yourself. When you understand that every long process contains fluctuation, you are no longer shocked by falling. You see it as a data point, a signal to read, not a sentence to accept. There are two ways people respond after a fall. One is self-blame, followed by quiet quitting. The other is observation, adjustment, and return. The first offers short-term comfort because it allows retreat without facing discomfort. The second requires you to hold responsibility even when the ego is bruised. But it is the second choice that builds durable strength. Standing up correctly begins with separating yourself from the behavior. You are not the fall. You are the person who experienced a fall. This distinction is critical. When you identify yourself with the mistake, you make it heavier than it truly is. When you treat it as an event, you preserve your ability to act, and action is the only thing that can correct trajectory. Every fall carries a specific lesson, not a vague lesson like try harder, but a lesson about the system, what led to the slip, which environment no longer fit, which part of the schedule eroded, which early signals were ignored. When you answer these questions honestly, the fall becomes valuable information. It shows you where reinforcement is needed. Mature people do not try to avoid every mistake. They build systems flexible enough to absorb mistakes without collapsing. They accept that some days fall below standard, but they do not allow that to extend into a pattern. They return quickly. This quick return matters far more than trying to never slip, because in reality, resilience determines how far you go. A common trap after falling is overcompensation. You try to do more than usual to erase guilt. You increase intensity suddenly. You set unsustainable standards. This rarely works. It often leads to another fall because the foundation has not recovered. Standing up the right way means returning to the baseline rhythm, keeping core actions. No more, no less. Just enough to bring the system back online. Falling also tests the ego. You want to prove you are not weak. You want to hide that you slipped. But maturity is not hiding. It is taking responsibility without self-degradation. You acknowledge the mistake to yourself. You adjust, and you continue. No announcement, no long explanation. The next action is the clearest answer. Each time you stand up, you send a powerful message inward. I do not abandon myself when I fail. This message repairs a deep fracture many people have carried for years. The fracture of only valuing themselves when things go well. When you stay with yourself even when imperfect, you build a resilient inner relationship. And that relationship is the foundation of every long-term effort. Falling also recalibrates expectations. When things go smoothly, it is easy to fall into the illusion that progress is always upward. A fall reminds you that real journeys have rhythm. Sometimes forward, sometimes stalled, Sometimes, a slight step back to gather momentum. When you accept this rhythm, you no longer panic at resistance. You know where you are in the cycle and what to do next. One important thing is not to prolong time on the ground through over-analysis. Sometimes analysis is necessary. But if analysis is used to delay returning, you are using intellect to avoid action. Standing up does not require full understanding. It only requires the next correct step. Understanding comes after movement. Some falls are not small. Some mistakes have clear consequences. In those cases, standing up also requires humility. You must accept loss. You must accept that some things cannot return to how they were. Even then, the ability to stand up remains valuable. You cannot change the past, but you can decide who that past turns you into. A victim of circumstance, or someone who learns to build stronger. Over time, you begin to see falls differently. You do not seek them, but you do not fear them. You know that each time you stand up, your capacity increases. You are less shaken. You recover faster. You no longer dramatize mistakes. This steadiness is the sign of real capability. Not the ability to never fall, but the ability to continue. Standing up after every fall also creates a powerful psychological advantage. You are no longer held back by fear of failure. When you know you can handle falling, you dare to go farther. You dare to attempt things that demand more. And this courage opens possibilities that the fear of falling will never allow. Ultimately, what turns stumbling into momentum is not vague positivity. It is a very concrete sequence of actions. Stop self-blame, observe the system, make small adjustments, return to the baseline rhythm, continue showing up. When this sequence is repeated enough times, you no longer see yourself as fragile. You see yourself as resilient. And in a world full of volatility, resilience is one of the rarest forms of strength. From here, the journey moves into a deeper phase. Once you know how to stand up, the challenge is no longer whether you will fall. It is whether you can keep faith in the process when results have not yet appeared, and that is where the next part begins. There is a phase that many people cannot endure. The phase where you are doing the right things, yet nothing seems to change. You keep discipline, you show up consistently, you refine the system, you stand back up after falling, but the surface of life remains quiet. No clear signals, no visible breakthrough, only the feeling that everything is standing still. This is the season when roots grow underground. And if you do not understand the law of this season, you may pull the entire tree out before it ever has a chance to grow. Real progress rarely reveals itself early. The most important part of growth happens where no one sees, beneath the surface, in small actions, in repetition, in efforts that go unrecognized. When you judge your effort by surface-level results, you are using the wrong measure. The surface only reflects the final outcome. It does not reflect the work being built deep within. Many people quit not because they are doing the wrong things, but because they interpret silence as failure. They assume that if results have not appeared, the direction must be flawed. But in every living system, there is a natural delay. Effort does not transform into results immediately. It accumulates. It stacks. It requires time to cross a threshold. Before that threshold, everything appears unchanged. Once it is crossed, change happens quickly. But those who do not trust the process will never stay long enough to witness that moment. Trusting the process is not blind faith. It is deep understanding of how things actually work. You know the body does not become strong from a single workout. The mind does not sharpen after one book. Character is not built from one courageous decision. Everything of value requires time to accumulate, and that time is non-negotiable. You cannot force it through impatience. In the season of underground roots, comparison becomes especially dangerous. You see the results of others without seeing the roots they built long before. You see their current outcomes and forget that you are in a different phase. When you compare across the wrong timing, You create false pressure. That pressure tempts you to change direction just to feel movement. But constant redirection is the most reliable way to go nowhere. Trusting the process also requires changing how you define progress. Instead of asking whether results have arrived, you ask whether you kept the system today. Instead of asking when success will come, you ask whether you are becoming the kind of person capable of carrying that success. When you change the question, the mind becomes calmer. You stop obsessing over timelines. You focus on the quality of your days. There are days in this season when fatigue feels heavier than usual, not because the work is harder, but because feedback is missing. Human beings need signals to sustain motivation. When signals are absent, you must rely on something deeper. You rely on the inner oath. You rely on the identity being formed. You rely on the truth that you are doing the right thing even without confirmation. This is a subtle form of strength that very few people ever develop. Trusting the process also means accepting that you do not control the speed of results. You only control the quality of action. When you try to control what is not in your hands, you create unnecessary tension. When you focus on what is in your hands, tension fades. You work with steadiness. And this steadiness allows you to last far longer than short-lived excitement ever could. The season of underground roots is where identity is completed. When there are no external rewards, you are forced to face the core questions. Will I continue if no one knows? Will I keep standards if no one acknowledges them? Will I honor the oath without immediate results? Your answers to these questions shape who you are becoming, and who you are becoming matters more than any temporary outcome. There is a strong temptation in this phase to complicate everything. You add strategies, you add goals, you add pressure. But often what you need is not more, but steadiness. Steadiness with the system, steadiness with rhythm, steadiness with core actions. Intentional simplicity is how you protect energy when results have not arrived. When you do less but do it right, you have the strength to stay. Trusting the process does not mean being passive. You still observe. You still make small adjustments. But you do not destroy the foundation out of impatience. You clearly distinguish between refinement and redirection. Refinement improves the system. Constant redirection destroys momentum. Mature people know when to adjust and when to continue. Gradually, you begin to notice subtle signs. You react more slowly to stimulation. You do not panic when progress is slow. You handle pressure with greater calm. These are real results, even if they are difficult to measure. They show that roots are growing. And when roots run deep, the tree can withstand far stronger winds than those that grow quickly with shallow foundations. There comes a quiet moment in this season when you realize you have changed. Even though external circumstances have not, you are less impatient. You no longer seek constant validation. You work with quiet certainty. This moment is not loud, but it signals that the process is working. You are becoming someone who can wait without quitting. Trusting the process is not something you declare. It is something you demonstrate through what you do when results are absent, when you continue to show up, when you keep the system, when you protect attention, when you do not betray standards. Each action is confirmation that you understand the law of real growth. And when you have stayed through the season of underground roots long enough, the final results appear not as a miracle, but as an inevitability. Others call it luck, but you know it is consequence. The consequence of trusting the process when no one was watching. From here, the journey enters its final stage. A stage where change is no longer only visible in results, but in the solid new identity that has been formed within. There comes a point in the journey when you no longer need to remind yourself to try, not because everything has become easy, but because you have become different. You no longer live in a state of waiting for emotion, waiting for the right moment, waiting for permission. You begin to live as an owner of your time, an owner of your attention, an owner of the standards you have chosen to keep. This transformation does not come from a single decision. It comes from hundreds of small choices repeated long enough to become reflex. In the past, when things became difficult, you often asked whether you should continue. Now that question carries far less weight, not because doubt is gone, but because doubt no longer has veto power. You do the work first, doubt comes later. You keep the rhythm, emotions arrange themselves afterward. You no longer need to persuade yourself each day. You have become someone who does not need persuasion to act. Identity transformation shows most clearly in how you make decisions. You no longer decide based on what feels comfortable right now. You decide based on what aligns with the person you are building. When those two conflict, you choose the second without prolonged debate. This clarity frees an enormous amount of energy. You no longer waste strength on hesitation. You use that strength to move forward. You also stop tying your value to external validation. When praise comes, you receive it without dependence. When silence comes, you do not panic. You understand that your rhythm of work does not require an audience. This does not make you cold. It makes you steady. You connect with others from a position of agency, not from the need to be affirmed. This transformation also changes how you see time. You no longer see time as something passing by and stealing opportunity. You see it as material you are actively using. Each day is a small block to build with. No day is perfect, but every day can be used well. When you live this way, urgency fades. You stop running. You move steadily. Another clear sign of the new identity is how you handle mistakes. Before, mistakes made you doubt yourself. Now, mistakes make you adjust the system. You no longer attach negative meaning to slipping rhythm. You read it as technical feedback. This allows you to maintain progress without carrying unnecessary emotional weight. You learn faster because you are not excessively self-judging. As you move from one who waits to one who owns, your relationship with discipline also changes. Discipline is no longer something you force yourself to follow. It becomes how you respect yourself. You do not keep standards out of fear of consequences. You keep them because you know who you become when you do not, and you do not want to return to that person. This is the most sustainable form of discipline because it is tied to identity rather than reward. You also begin to notice that much of the pressure that once weighed on you has disappeared, not because circumstances are lighter, but because inner uncertainty is gone. When you know what you will do regardless of situation, pressure decreases significantly. You no longer expend energy constantly reassuring yourself. Inner stability creates a buffer against external volatility. Identity transformation does not make you rigid. On the contrary, it makes you more adaptable. When the foundation is solid, you can adjust without losing direction. You can experiment without losing your axis. You are no longer afraid that one wrong decision will ruin everything. You know you have the capacity to correct and continue. This confidence is not loud, it is quiet and real. Another important shift is that you begin to influence without trying. Not through advice, but through how you live. Your consistency sets a standard. Others feel the difference. They see that you do not react impulsively. They see that you keep rhythm. They see that you are not swayed by noise. And that makes them wonder what is supporting you. Real influence always begins with identity. When you look back on the journey, you do not see a single leap that changed everything. You see a sequence of ordinary days lived with clear standards. You see difficult phases that were passed through. You see falls that were handled. You see the season of roots that was waited out. And you understand that the most valuable thing you gained was not only results, but the person you became along the way. Moving from one who waits to one who owns is an irreversible transformation. You can no longer pretend you do not know what you now know. You can no longer return to reactive living without feeling misaligned. The new identity has set a new standard, and that standard will guide every choice that follows. This stage is not the end. It is the point where you step into life with a different posture. The posture of responsibility. The posture of someone who keeps their word to themselves. the posture of someone no longer pulled by circumstance. And from that posture, the final part of the journey is no longer about what you achieve, but about how you will hold and live this identity over the long term. This journey does not end with a loud moment. There is no cheering. There is no milestone that forces the world to pay attention. The ultimate victory happens quietly. It happens when you realize that you are no longer pulled the way you once were. Not by fleeting emotions, not by surrounding noise, not by other people's expectations. You still live within a volatile world, but you stand in a different position, the position of someone in control. This victory is not about reaching a specific goal. Goals can come and go. The victory is that you have become someone who can guide yourself through different phases without losing your axis. You do not need to push yourself to begin. You do not need to convince yourself to continue. You know what you will do, even when no one is watching. And that certainty is something very few people possess. When you are no longer pulled away, you begin to live slower but deeper. You do not react impulsively. You do not let one difficult day make you doubt the entire path. You do not let one comment redirect you. You observe. You choose. You act. This sequence happens naturally, without tension. This is the mark of real maturity. Not controlling everything, but not allowing everything to control you. You also look back at the things that once unsettled you and realize they have lost their power. Not because you avoid them, but because you have outgrown them. Comparisons that once disoriented you are now just information. Doubts that once held you back are now background noise. You hear them but do not follow. You feel them but are not carried away. This difference does not come from momentary willpower. It comes from an identity forged over time. The ultimate victory also shows in how you face the future. You no longer need to see the entire road to take the next step. You trust your ability to handle what comes. You know that whatever challenge appears, you have a system. You have discipline. You have the ability to stay. You have the ability to stand back up. This confidence is not based on hope. It is based on accumulated experience. And confidence built on experience is very difficult to shake. When you are no longer pulled away, you begin to create stability for those around you. Not through advice, but through presence. You do not overreact. You do not spread panic. You keep rhythm. In a world full of uncertainty, the one who keeps rhythm becomes valuable. Not because they know everything, but because they do not lose themselves when things shake. This victory also carries a new responsibility. The responsibility to maintain standards when no one is forcing you. The responsibility not to loosen simply because you have come far. The responsibility to continue living in alignment with the identity you built, even when results have appeared. Because identity is not something you achieve and put away. It is something you live with every day. You understand that there is no final destination where everything stops. Life continues to present new tests. But unlike before, you no longer enter those tests with anxiety. You enter them with calm. You know you can handle them. You know you will not abandon yourself halfway through. And that knowing is the foundation of real freedom. The ultimate victory does not place you above others. It returns you to your rightful place, the place of responsibility, the place of keeping your word, the place of no longer living by reaction. When you live from that place, many choices become simple. You no longer ask what to do to be approved. You ask what is aligned with the person you have become. And when you finish this journey, you do not carry a formula. You carry a new person, a person who can focus, who can stay, who can wait, who can stand back up, who can keep rhythm in silence. That is a victory no one can take from you, because it does not live in circumstance. It lives in you. You have reached the end of this journey. And if you are still here, it means that something deep within you is ready to live differently. What you have just heard is not temporary motivation, but a clear map showing why life does not change when you wait, and only changes when you reclaim control. You have seen that strength does not come from emotional surges, but from focus, from quiet discipline, from the ability to show up every day, from staying through difficult days, from standing back up after every fall, and from trusting the process even when results are not yet visible. In the end, true victory is not found in the goals you achieve, but in the person you become. A person who is no longer pulled by noise, by circumstances, or by their own procrastination. Thank you for giving your time and attention to walk this journey to the end. If this content offered you a new perspective or caused you to pause and reflect on how you are living, take one small action right now. Press like to support the channel. Share this video with someone you believe needs to hear it, and subscribe to continue walking alongside stories that help you build inner strength, keep discipline, and live with intention every single day.